Welcome to the latest episode of the Brand Shorthand Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Vandergrift, and with me is Lorraine Kessler, Thing One, and we have a special guest today, Dr. Scott Powell, Professor of Marketing from Grove City College. Hello, Scott. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you doing, Mark and Lorraine?
Doing, we're doing real well.
Good.
Dr. Powell, he has worked at Grove City College since 1991. You don't look that old.
Well, that's not what my students tell me.
He was hired as assistant dean of the college and was later promoted to assistant to the president and admissions marketing coordinator. And I think that's when we got to know you. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's been over 20 years that we've known you, and that's just hard to fathom.
I know.
That we pitched Grove City College back in, what was it, 2003? Is that what we determined?
That's about right. Yep.
Oh my gosh. No way.
Yep.
Yeah.
So he held that position as admissions marketing coordinator. And I'm sorry,
Yes.
you had both positions. So he held the latter two positions for 14 years, serving 4 different presidents. That's impressive. And assisting in a wide range of administrative operations for the college.
Right.
In addition, he has been a member of the faculty since he was hired. In 2006, he transitioned to full-time faculty status, and after completing a doctorate in marketing and additional years of successful teaching, he was promoted to Professor of Marketing, which you hold as your title today. Prior to starting at Grove City College, Dr. Powell worked in retail sales, buying, and advertising for nearly a decade. He had a contract drawn up. I love this story. We'll let you share it a little bit later. To purchase the company that he was working for. And I think that was your uncle's company. Is that correct?
It was actually a very good friend of my father's. So no relation, but just longtime friends.
Very good. And then God intervened in a surprising way. And that led him out of retailing and into academics. And he's very passionate about marketing, teaching, integrating faith and learning, and mentoring students, of whom he has taught over, I think the count is 6,000 plus now, right?
Yeah, I'm at about 6,400 now.
Wow, that's great. And what we love is he's passionate about positioning. So that we'll dive deep into that.
Yeah.
In his courses, he dives deeply into marketing with an emphasis on what it means to be both a Christian and a marketer, as well as a consumer. Yeah. His primary areas of expertise are marketing theory and strategy. He is constantly researching, studying, and observing the marketplace. So much so that his wife, Christine, a Grove City College grad, doesn't really like shopping with him. So, Scott, tell us about that last sentence.
Yeah, I call it field research. She just finds it quite annoying because I'm always pointing out package changes and point of purchase displays. And she's like, can't I just shop? And I'm like, no, we need to talk about this. So she tries to sneak out of the house without me. And I'm like, I know where you're going and I'm coming. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Very good. And I know you're a bit of an entrepreneur. I loved the story that you told us about your book business.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that. You don't have to go into great detail, but we'd love to hear what you did there.
Sure. So a friend of an old college roommate of mine who's very entrepreneurial in nature, he came up with an idea, and I kind of liked the idea that we could contract with companies, nonprofits that received a lot of book donations. So, for example, Goodwill and Salvation Army. So I got in contact with them in the Pittsburgh area and learned that they get tens of thousands of books every week, which just kind of floored me. And they usually don't sell very well in stores, and so they would love to find someone to purchase them. So long story short, in a period of about 18 months, we found a warehouse, we incorporated an LLC, made a contract with Goodwill to buy pretty much all of the books in the Pittsburgh area that they had, hired 3 employees, set up a system of being able to scan these books and then resell them on Amazon. And our first 12 months, we actually made about $230 some thousand in sales.
Wow.
Which sounds wonderful until you back out all of Amazon's fees, and we ended up clearing $4,000. So not real profitable and very labor intensive, but I learned a lot about e-commerce, and we tried pivoting to sell to some used uh, bulk book buyers that would buy huge volumes, and we tried selling on eBay for about half a year and ended up pushing just over I think 1,300,000 books in
Wow.
2 years, but just couldn't make any money. It's a really low profit margin, high labor business. So it was fun, but didn't last.
Very good. Well, we all have to learn in the marketplace like that, right?
We,
There's
yeah,
no better teacher than diving into business, especially in the world of e-commerce these days.
no.
Good. Well, give us a little bit of background. What led you to Grove City College in the first place?
Yeah, sure. It's a crazy story. I would say chance if I wasn't a believer, but Proverbs says something like, a man plans his course, but the Lord directs his steps. And I graduated back in the mid '80s, and I had a management major. And I always wanted to own my own business. So when I graduated, I was looking for a small business that I might be able to either start or buy. And as we mentioned earlier, one of my dad's friends had a little retail furniture company. It had like 19 employees. I think they were doing about $1.5 million in sales then. And he was looking to retire. He was about 70-ish and wanted somebody to take over his business. And I had known him all my life. And I said, well, I'd be glad to come and learn your business. And if you would be willing to sell it to me and help finance the process. And not that I just necessarily loved furniture, but I just wanted to run my own business. And so I started and did all the grunt work. I, delivered mattresses and furniture and heavy stuff, despite my huge size. I was carrying lots of big things and installed carpet, and I did the buying and I did advertising and sales. And I just fell in love with the marketing side of it.
Mhm.
And so I was literally about a week away from signing the contract to actually purchase this business. Let me back up. I had been teaching one evening sales class at Butler County Community College, and my sister-in-law had worked there, and she said, we need someone at the school to fill in for one semester to teach an evening sales class. And I'm like, well, I'm only working 6 days a week. I need more to do. So I taught it, and I loved it. I was the youngest person in the room. It was all non-traditional students, and I just thought, this is really fun. So at the end of the semester, they didn't need me anymore, and I just was talking to people, and they said, well, why don't you, go to Grove City College and see if they're looking for a part-time faculty. So I walked in cold. I was 26 years old. I had all of one semester of teaching under my belt, one class, and I'd finished my MBA at Pitt, and I was working in retail. And it's crazy. I walked into the president's office because I didn't know anybody on campus, and I just said, could I have an appointment with the dean? And no, that's not the way we do things here. So I'm like, well, what should I do? And she said, well, you need to go home and write a letter to the dean and explain what you want. So I did. I went home and pulled out my typewriter. Right now, you see those in ancient museums of ancient history, but I used this typewriter and I sent a letter. Nope, I never heard anything. So about 3 weeks later, I came back in. The woman didn't recognize me. I said, can I meet with the dean? No, you need to send a letter. I'm like, I've already done that. She said, well, perhaps that's your answer. And I'm usually not kind of flummoxed for words, and I'm just standing there because I didn't know what to say. And the door opens behind me, and this very distinguished looking man walks in, and I just took a shot. I'm like, Dr. Anderson? And he's like, yes. I said, could I have 5 minutes of your time? And so he's like, okay. And the secretary didn't like that too much, that I'd
She didn't
escaped
get
her.
up and block you physically.
No, I think she shot laser beams in my back, though. And you probably don't want to hear this, but when I sat down, it's the middle of summer, and there's a wasp on my tie. I don't know how. It must have just landed there when I'm going in the building, and I totally freaked out. And I flicked it, and it went right on his neck. And I'm petrified. I'm like literally, and he swats this thing, and I was like so embarrassed. And I think I literally said, I should probably leave now.
This
And he's
should
like,
be in
no.
Seinfeld. They should do an
Oh,
episode.
it was a Seinfeld episode. It really was. And he's like, I've never had anyone, flick a wasp on me before. And what is it that you wanted? And I said, I was just kind of looking for a part-time teaching position. And we started talking. And about a half an hour later, he turns to me and he's like, I'm not interested in hiring you as a part-time faculty member. I'm like, okay. And so I start to get up, and he's like, no, sit down. He's like, I'm going to be promoted to executive vice president of the college, and I need someone to backfill my position. Are you interested in my job? I had no idea what to say. I'm a
Indeed.
furniture guy.
I have to keep the woman in the front.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And guess who became my secretary?
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So it was the craziest thing,
It
because
is
I
crazy.
literally was 1 week away from signing the contract to own this business. And I'm like, I've got this contract. And, Dr. Anderson was a pretty intimidating guy. He's like, well, you've got a decision to make. And so I tore up the contract, started as assistant dean and kind of admissions marketing coordinator for the college. And that was 34 years ago. And I remember coming in every day, don't get fired, don't get fired, pretend that you're smarter than you are. And I guess they never caught on until it was too late. So I'm still
That
here.
is
And
that is a
that's how I started.
fabulous story.
It's a funny career.
And what was the collection of individuals that all mentioned Grove City College having? I mean, you were in Indiana at the time.
Yeah, I actually went to school in Indiana, and then I actually came back after I graduated. My family grew up in Butler, which is about
Mhm.
half an hour south of Grove City here,
Right.
that's where I was living at the time. And
Okay.
so I had just completed my MBA at the University of Pittsburgh in marketing, and I'd been working at this store full time, and it was just kind of a random thing that I went to Grove City, and the position was never advertised. They never interviewed for this, and I literally did an impromptu 30-minute interview and was hired. So it's just kind of hard to believe.
It's very hard to believe, especially with the
Yeah.
wasp incident.
Yeah. I don't recommend that as an
No, I
interviewing
don't. Yeah,
strategy. So,
that's
but yeah,
awesome. What a great
We
story.
call that making memories in our family.
yeah,
Mhm.
If it just went down as a regular interview, you wouldn't have remembered it.
no, probably not. So that's kind of my whole professional career. I served as that for 6 months, and then I was promoted to assistant to the president. And I was teaching the whole time too. So he's like, and by the way, if you take this position, you can teach part-time. So I've taught marketing related classes ever since 1991.
Okay.
And then in 2006, I decided to go full-time. So that's pretty much my career.
Very good. And you have, I won't do the math, but you have 33 years of teaching history here,
Yeah.
plus 1 year uh, teaching one class. What has been over those years? What has been your favorite class to teach?
Sure. I'm just going to say principles of marketing, the,
Okay,
the entry level class.
the basics.
Yeah, it is, because I think there's such a misunderstanding in what marketing really is about. And when I meet people, they often ask me, what do you do? I say college professor, and it's a big smile. And what do you teach? And I say marketing, and it's a big frown. Oh, you're one of them.
Mhm.
And I'm like, who are they? Oh, those people that just try and force me to get buy stuff that I don't want. I'm like, no, that's not my definition of marketing. I like to find out what people want and then give it to them. And
Mhm.
so I like to see kind of the light go on in freshmen's eyes of, oh, so marketing is more than just sales, and it's more than just advertising, and kind of give them a nice foundation for what it's about. So that's the class that I get. I love all the classes I teach, but I think that's the most fun.
Mhm.
Very good. Well, Lorraine, you and I always talk about what's being taught in marketing classes these days in most universities, and we're not seeing the angle of positioning in most
Yeah.
of those. Um, Either not, there's no interest in it by the faculty, or we're not really sure. So maybe you can give us some insight into that, Scott, a little bit more, because you have a particular passion for positioning.
Yeah, I
When did
do.
you first hear about it? And then, as a marketing philosophy, and then why did it stick with you as a preferred approach? Was this something that, from the very beginning when you went to uh, get your MBA at Pittsburgh, or is this something that crept into your life later on?
Yeah. So it's really kind of interesting that when I started in 1991 teaching at the college, um, I had, even in my MBA classes, I never even heard the word positioning mentioned that I recall.
Hmm.
And I had never heard of, the importance of perception and differentiation and positioning at all. I'd been taught I'm just going to say, very theoretical, complex definitions of marketing and I'm just going to say more scientific / rational
Mhm.
Hmm.
views of it, which I think most of us don't really buy that way. And so the first I'd ever heard of positioning was I grew up in a family a small family, and we're all readers. I've always read. I've loved reading since I was a kid. And so when I started at the college, I was ripped out of the retail world and kind of thrown into academia. And my mother, who was always buying books, that she was always looking for things that would interest our family. And she said, I found this one called Position. And I'd
Hmm.
never heard of it. It
Oh,
was the
wow.
original Reese and Trout book. And I read that book, and she had no concept, nor did I, of how that was going to totally transform my way of thinking and
Uh-huh.
teaching. So I want to credit her with finding a book. I don't even know where she found it, at some store,
Huh.
and just bought it. And I read it literally over one weekend. And I'm like, this makes so much more sense than anything I've ever heard of or learned before. So, I mean, I had an undergrad degree and a master's degree focusing on marketing, and I'd never heard any of these things. I'm like, this makes so much sense. And this is the way that I think. And it was just intuitive to me. So that's kind of how I first heard about positioning. And then I just read every single book that I could find that Al Reese and Jack Trout wrote. I have their whole collection. You might even see it on the shelves behind me. You can't, but that whole shelf
Yeah.
is their books.
Yep.
And I
See
grabbed everything,
differentiated dye.
just read it.
Yep.
So that's kind of my history.
That
I
is
think
good.
you even have a quote out in front of your office
I
that you
do.
showed.
Yep, I do.
Which quote was that? I can't even remember.
Yeah, I actually have two. I have marketing is a battle of perceptions, not products. And the
Okay.
other one is customers don't buy, they choose.
Hmm.
Differentiate or die. So I have those in big letters right outside my office. So none of my students can miss those things.
Right.
Very good.
And one of the benefits of positioning that I think is not talked about a lot is that it actually helps the customer to choose. It's an assistance. It helps, like, do I want fast or do I want reliable? It helps me make decision in the tyranny of choice kind of era we're in. And that's a real benefit. I mean, that's very customer focused, in my opinion.
I agree.
Mhm.
And I love the way that they really put forth the concept that customers think category first and brand second.
Yes.
Mhm.
And so I'm looking for an electric car. Okay, I'm getting a Tesla. I want some family friendly entertainment. I'm going Disney. I mean, I think that's just the way we think. And
Mhm.
when our family's like, well, what do you want for dinner? Well, let's get Italian. Okay, do you want to go to Olive Garden? Because I really like the fact of the category and then owning a category.
Right.
That's the whole heart of branding.
Yeah, when we did the appreciative discoveries, the first thing that I would look for in every client's history, we had them fill out an extensive backgrounder, and then we would investigate their competitors and a lot of preparation before we went into the session, because it was a 4-hour accelerated session, and in 4 hours we had to help that client get to the decision, and it had to be their decision.
Right.
But in doing that, one of the things that we really tried to focus on, what I tried to focus on, was, can they own a new category? I mean, number one, is there opportunity to create a new category? That was always number one. And either that's on the table or off the table. And if it's off the table, then we got to go fish. But that to me is the high bar. And if you have the means to do that and the will to do that, that's the best way to position.
Right. I completely agree.
Mhm.
And that's why I like principles, is
Mhm.
because when you start at the foundational level and you teach this right out of the gate, you don't have to try and retrain people to think differently about marketing and kind of forget the things that they've learned. And you're kind of building up. And it's so intuitive that when most people really understand it, they're like, this makes perfect sense. And this is
Yeah.
how I think. And that's how I make decisions. So yeah, I think it's just amazing.
Are
And
you
it's funny.
familiar with the book Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow by Daniel?
Yes.
All
Yeah.
right. There is no better case, right, for the idea that we make decisions, choice decisions, buying decisions, and system one thinking. Intuitive, impressionistic, imagist, The idea that marketing, as you were saying, through your MBA, is talking about the rational side of the brain is like you're on the wrong side of the tracks the whole
Yeah.
way,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't
it just
say that
blows
anymore,
my,
Lorraine.
it just blows my. It's like the train's going the wrong direction. You're
Yeah,
never going to get
it
there.
is.
Yeah.
It really is, because that's not the way most people approach the marketplace at all.
No. That's not how our minds work. We're system
No.
one driven. And what happens is, and I think Roy Williams said this, right? But system one thinking, which is that more intuitive, automatic,
Yeah.
it makes system two, rational thinking, want what system one wants. It convinces it, it gives system two the rationale for why it should want what system one wants. I just think Trout does a really good job with that in his books too, but I just
Yeah.
felt like it's another confirmation in this Nobel Prize winning book.
Yeah. I agree. It literally, that one book made
Mhm.
more of an impact on my thinking than my entire graduate degree of
That's
other
incredible.
more heady
Yeah.
understanding and logical understanding of marketing. And I'm
Yeah,
just doctoral level too.
Yeah.
Trout and Reese don't get the respect they deserve even at the doctoral level, because, and I remember raising their names in one of my first classes, and I kind of got this rather condescending look from this rather academic person, and it's like, well, that's nice if you believe that, but this is the academic way to approach that. So,
Yeah.
but I think I
it
had
feels
convinced him later.
yeah, it feels like the complexity part of it is what most academics like,
Right.
because they can spin, if you will,
Yeah.
in the academia.
Right.
And those people on the street, like Trout and Reese,
Yeah.
they need that gut. What is it that's going to sell product?
Right.
And I think that's, maybe you've answered the question in a long about way, in that positioning so simple to grasp
Yeah.
that it just doesn't provide enough extensive fodder in the academic circles to spin, talking about it enough, and having enough debate and philosophical discussion and diatribe around.
Yeah.
And but we who have to sell more product, you talked about selling mattresses and furniture and all that.
Yeah.
You didn't sit there and get all complex on, oh, how am I going to do this?
No.
You went instinctual with it, and probably noted that differentiation works every single time.
Yeah, it really
Well,
does.
it's the difference between the real world and the theoretical world. And what I would do if I was in academia, I would simply quote Michael Porter, who makes what Reese and Trout says much more complicated and highfalutin. And
Oh
I would
yeah.
just simply use him
And
because we
that's
all
true,
love
right?
Michael Porter
Oh yeah,
or
you get
David
taught Michael
Akers.
Porter all the time, and I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, that's just a
Oh,
little bit
yeah.
more confusing way of saying what
Yeah.
Trout has said much more eloquently and
Right.
simply. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And
Right. I agree completely.
Well, Lorraine, you had some questions about higher ed in general,
yeah, lots
about
is going on.
some of the things that they're doing with marketing
Yeah.
themselves. So I'll let you kind of dive into those questions if you want.
Well, there's a couple of questions. One of the things that sometimes we talk about in terms of repositioning a category or what's going on, there are forces other than competition that affect a brand. The macro forces that come from the outside, changing behaviors, changing beliefs, can affect a brand. So, you have to adapt. I think Trout and Reese Trout calls it adapting to crisis, competition, and change, right?
Right.
So one of the things that you said right off the bat was that you had 4 different presidents in how many years? 20?
I was in there at the office 14 years and served 4 different presidents.
That's like a shorter time than CMOs and Americans,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I
Right.
mean, it's real to me, an institution of higher education, right? It
Yeah.
has a sustainable kind of image. It has to have a long-term kind of sustainable. It can't be shifting with fads, right? It does have to respond to trends, but that's different than fads. And under 4 different leaders in that short amount of time, how has Grove City navigated that?
Yeah, it was really interesting to watch. You got to remember that I was 26 and I had no experience in
Mhm.
higher education. I mean, I'd been a student, but I'd never been in college administration. And so to be in the president's office with four people who had very, very different strategic ideas about the college, very different management styles, very different communication styles, it was a lot for me to kind of keep my ear to the ground and learn what do I need to do here and how can I help kind of guide this ship from a marketing perspective. Because when I came in, we when I started in 1991, the first president, he called us Freedom's College. And this is the college's,
Hmm.
history book written by Lee Edwards. I don't know if you've ever heard of Lee Edwards, but
Yeah.
very conservative. And we were kind of the red, white, and blue, America's best kept secret conservative school that told the government, keep your money. And that was kind of our position. And I decided that I wanted to go back to the very founding days and see what really was the original position that our founders had for Grove City.
Hmm.
And I actually became quite a fanboy of our founder. Grove City was founded by a 27-year-old. And that really resonated with me because I was 27 at the time. And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
I'm assistant to the president, but there's no way I could have ever founded a school. And his name was Isaac Kettler. And Isaac said, I would like to establish an institution that would help develop young leaders capable of pushing civilization forward on every frontier. I'm such a fanboy that I memorized that. And
Huh.
to that end, I want to establish an institution with a tripartite mission, a threefold mission: academic excellence in a thoroughly Christian environment at a price that families of modest means can afford.
Right.
So it was really those combination of three things that made us kind of strong and unique, because there's lots of good schools, but they aren't conservative Christian. They're not affordable, the Ivy League schools.
Mhm.
There's a lot of affordable schools that aren't necessarily quality and certainly aren't Christian. And there's lots of other Christian schools that kind of do similar things, but it's all three of those things that kind of make us unique. And so one of my very I have it hanging here. One of my very rudimentary first marketing pieces was, we're a chord of three strings. And if you're
Mhm.
looking for quality education in a Christian environment at an affordable cost, we're the only game in town. You
Mhm.
can get one or two of those anywhere else, but we're the only place that really has all three.
Mhm.
And that was a difference from this. And so when that president left, his real focus was on the academic rigor of the school. He was about getting our applications up, our acceptance rates down, so that we could cull a better student body. It was really about being independent. The next person that came in had a more Christian emphasis and wanted us to kind of steer not just rah 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 the flag in America and freedom, but also go back to kind of the thoroughly Christian nature. And then other presidents had different views. So the ship has kind of moved a lot of different directions. And honestly, Mark, your alma mater, Hillsdale, kind of took this up and
Mhm.
ran with it and communicated it way better than we did,
Yep.
Mhm.
and kind of eat our lunch in that position. They've been very consistent in being independent, and the whole Imprimis newsletter they do. And I have a
Yeah.
lot of respect for Hillsdale. Um, and
They
so,
threw, yeah, what's interesting though, they were founded as a Baptist
right,
institution. That part is basically gone. They're trying
yeah,
to come back a little bit, but they're not
right,
thoroughly Christian, if you want to use that phrase.
correct,
Nor would I put them in the affordable category, although they do a lot to assist their students to go there. But
they do,
yeah, freedom is their cause.
yep,
Independence from the government is the way they
correct.
see it. Yep.
Yeah, and even though the Supreme Court case is Grove City College versus Bell, they're the ones that really picked it up and ran with it and have
Mhm.
positioned themselves quite successfully, I would say,
Mm-hmm.
in that
Yeah.
position. So that kind of left us and me as a young marketing director that was trying to navigate a lot of presidential changes, I should say, and different positioning strategies. And so the first president challenged me to describe the college in 7 words. He's like, if you had 7 words to tell me why I should think about coming to Grove City College, what would you say? And he was an interesting guy. He really taught me the concept of parsimony in communication, getting to the point and very succinctly. And so I thought a lot about that. And along with this kind of three strands thing, at that point in time, we were by far the most affordable college that's like us. And so I went back with the 7-word position of the most affordable, top-ranked Christian college.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking for some place that has a challenge and is conservative and Christian, and you want to be able to afford it, we're kind of your place to go. And as Hillsdale has done a really good job with fundraising. I think they have like $1 billion endowment or something. It's very large.
And 98% of their donors have never stepped foot on the campus.
Yes. That used to be a really significant part of donations to our campus, but that's not as important as it used to be anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was assistant to the president in 1991, we would often get, letters from people. I appreciate your stance, and here's a check to support that. And it was really central to who we were.
Mm-hmm.
But I think as Hillsdale kind of started to own that position, and we kind of were going slightly different ways, that's when we had to kind of reposition a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about the time that you and Lorraine got invited over to help us, I had kind of come up with the idea of Ivy of a different league.
Mm-hmm.
We're an Ivy-like school in that we're very serious about academics, and we've got this beautiful campus that looks kind of Ivy League-ish, but we're not woke, and we're not. You're not going to go broke because of our tuition being so high, and so that was kind of a category that I was trying to figure out how to communicate that, and you guys came over and helped us pitch some ideas, and unfortunately, I was outgunned and outvoted, and we didn't end up going with you, which I think was to our true detriment, because shortly after that, I gave up my position as marketing director and moved to faculty, and we've had like 4 or 5 different, how can I put this tactfully, 4 or 5 different directions that we've taken, that none of which I think are really truly differentiating or really clearly communicate who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And most recently, just about, I think 3 weeks ago, our marketing director retired. She resigned. And the president of the school called me down. He said, I'd like to talk to you about strategic marketing. And he said, what do you think some of the issues are that we have here at the school? And I said, well, number one is we've got so many different communication silos on campus. We kind of have the alumni office saying one thing, and development is saying one thing, and admissions is saying one thing, and we have a graduate program that's saying one thing, and we've got departments saying different things, and the sports, all the sports programs. And I'm like, there's just no unity in our message. And I said, I think we need someone to really bring all of that together, point us all in the same direction, and have a clear and compelling and concise position. And he not being a marketer, he's like, well, tell me, what do you mean by positioning? So I actually did a little primer for him and the vice presidents on kind of what is marketing strategy, what's positioning, how do you differentiate? And so I was encouraged that they wanted to hear that.
That's great.
Because I think we need to do a little bit better job of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to talk too much. I'm sorry if I'm too long-winded.
So where is, well, one of the things that you said, I think, is one of the, to those who are listening, this is something to watch out for. You said you had like 3 or 4 different directions within a short period of time. Mm-hmm. One of those, and maybe even the tertiary one, could have been a fairly good direction. And it requires constancy and consistency, right? Sometimes it's not that there's a perfect position and you have the less perfect. It's if you say the same thing that has some value with constancy and consistency over time, it begins to take on, it's like a snowball going down the ski slope, right? It's going to get bigger and bigger. But when you truncate that constantly, and this year it's this, and next year it's that, and we're going to add to it and now devolve it, that's kind of a problem. Now, you said something too I'm interested in. You said, going back to the beginning, there was, and this almost relates to a Simon Sinek idea, there was a why. Like, why do we exist? And we exist to create leaders. And I would add the word principled leaders.
Correct.
And where's that in today's narrative for the college?
I meet with a lot of prospective prospective students and their families. I always communicate that. I think So I think some departments and what I'm calling silos, but just different communication um, departments on campus here. Some of us say that pretty consistently, but not all of us.
Hmm.
And I think that's a big problem. You know, everybody knows Nike's slogan is just do it. What's Puma's?
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
don't know. You
Mhm.
know, what's Adidas's? I don't know. For a while, it was impossible as nothing. I don't know if it's still
Yeah.
that or not. But it's that consistency of, like you said, of saying the same thing repeatedly. Oh, I understand what this is
In the
about.
same
And
way.
I think, yeah,
Largely in the same way.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we have not done as good a job of that as we can. And Grove City's not struggling. I think we're doing well, but I think we could do a lot better if we could more clearly articulate our position.
Yeah.
Well, and what's funny is in the church arena, because we all come out of
Mhm.
churches if we're in the Christian realm like you are,
Right,
we get the VBS, the Vacation Bible School approach to marketing.
right,
And the killer thing there is that what's typical with VBS, there's a new theme every year.
right.
So every year it's a new theme, and we have to interest kids in a different way with a different theme, and that's what happens to marketing.
Yes.
That's what fights again. The church is probably the worst in terms of being contrary to what Lorraine just said of consistency and constancy.
Mhm.
Yes, it is. And it's funny because I remember kind of fighting this battle when I was the marketing director and I pitched this cord of three strands idea, that it's
Mhm.
Mhm.
these three things that make us strong and unique. And I used to get pushback all the time. It's time for you to change that tagline. I'm like, no, it's time for you to come up with something new. You're getting paid every year and you're not creating anything new. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. And
Mm.
well, you know, we're tired of seeing this. I'm like, I don't care. You're here. You're
Mhm.
faculty. I'm
Mhm.
trying to recruit new people. And as long as this keeps working, I'm not going to change it. I
Mhm.
always tell my students the only time to change an ad campaign is when it stops working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my belief.
Yep, that's absolutely true. I mean that is the problem that people, insiders, end up being saboteurs,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so and I think Mark asked me about, and I was going to go to some of these macro trends. I just need to look at my notes for a second.
Yeah.
Um,
While you're doing
here,
that,
yeah,
I have one thing to share with you, Scott, and
yeah,
maybe this will help as you share with the leadership that's talked to you. We always say branding is boring business,
yep,
Yeah.
yeah,
and it's boring for the people putting it on.
Yeah.
But if there's a place that has completely new audience every year, it's a university. I
Yes.
mean, every year
Yep.
you have thousands of kids you're trying to reach that they might have started to hear about you 2, 3 years ago, but they only got serious their junior and senior year.
Excuse me. Yes, you're right.
Yep. So they're going to have to, kind of live with whatever's developed, or you will go back to that VBS style of marketing.
Yep. Absolutely.
So one of the, and I think, concerning trends, not a fad, right, is that in the field of higher education, there's been a persistent dip in enrollment.
Mhm.
And of course, the pandemic took a bigger dip, but it's still a dip, historically, from 2011 to 2022. And the related to that, 41% of the students, males are only represent 41% of the students now today.
Mhm.
So it's skewed now more female. And I just wonder, how is that affecting Grove City College? How is it affecting your marketing? Have you seen that a dip in enrollment that's consistent with the larger scene, or have you been anomalously happy?
Yeah. So there's a couple things there. I think one of the biggest trends is that we are in an area of the United States, Western PA, Eastern Ohio, that not only has been losing people at a greater rate, but is projected to continue to lose population. If you look at the demographic trends, maybe it's the lovely weather we get here, but
Yeah.
people aren't just dying to live here,
Mhm.
they are leaving the area, which is a challenge when you're a regional school, which is predominantly Pennsylvania and the contiguous states, and you are having a smaller base to draw from. or market to every year. That's a challenge for us.
Yeah.
I think the thing that has really helped us is the fact that there are fewer and fewer conservative schools each year.
Mhm.
And this week, I've met with students from Utah, California, Tennessee, and Texas that came here because they're like, we didn't know there was a school like you still around.
Oh,
So
wow.
while the demographics in our area have been against us, the fact that we are increasingly different than most universities that are becoming much more progressive and liberal and very different culture than we have here, we've benefited from people coming from larger distances. So we have not seen an enrollment drop. We've
That's
stayed
amazing.
really consistent. We're about 2,300 students every year, and that's right sized for us.
Yeah.
We
That's
don't really want to
super.
grow because that changes who we are. It changes the feel, and we've never had an enrollment issue. As for the males, we're anomalous. We actually had the last 2 years, our incoming classes were 54% male.
Oh, wow.
So we actually have a slight male majority by a few percentage points.
Yeah.
And I think one reason is that we have a lot of majors that tend to attract males.
Mhm.
We have a strong engineering program, strong business program, things that sometimes are a little more attractive to males.
Yeah.
Not that females don't find that interesting, but they skew heavily male.
Right.
Some of the harder sciences. So I don't know if it's that. We've noticed that we've been getting fewer applications from females, and the research that we've done is showing it because they tend to be more price sensitive.
Hmm.
And because we don't take federal funds and because we don't have $1 billion endowment, we're not as relatively affordable as we used to be. And we lose a lot of females who say, we would love to come here, but we just don't have the financial wherewithal to pay for that. Or we're getting a huge, discount or a huge scholarship elsewhere.
Right.
And males have not seemed to be quite as price sensitive.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers your question at all.
It does beautifully, and it shows that when you take these macro trends, they do factor in public
Mhm.
institutions, private institutions, and so it's not always the same. I think to your credit, that's great, but it also suggests to me an opportunity. If this conservative value set is missing, and now your geography has expanded, there seems
Right.
like there's more opportunity through very targeted psychographic marketing to
Yes.
that ideal, to that mindset,
Yep.
to reach beyond the regional area. And are you
Right.
doing that? And if so, how?
Yeah, and you're exactly right. I could not agree
Mhm.
more. And when I met with the president about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I basically said, we have some challenges, but we also have some opportunities. I think our biggest challenge is not the demographic challenge right now. It is how do we reach a larger group of people from a more diverse geographic region? And
Mhm.
that's going to take some finances. And I looked over at the CFO, which kind of grimaced a little bit at me because they're always a little reticent to say, oh, yes, let's increase the marketing budget.
Mhm.
And I'm like, to do that, we're going to need to increase some marketing budgets here. So I think that's on the table, and I would say that they're receptive to that. Because if we continue to lose population in this area, and fewer people in general are going to college at all these days,
Mhm.
it's funny. I just read a Wall Street Journal article yesterday that was saying only about 38% of all Americans over the age of 25 have a BA degree, an undergraduate degree. Most people think it's higher than that, but it's
Yeah,
actually
I would.
in the high 30s, and it's dropping, and it's been dropping every year.
Wow.
Because people think, I'm not going to spend all this money to send my child somewhere and have them indoctrinated or not really prepare them for a career. And so I think the whole mindset of college itself is changing.
Yes,
So,
the idea that that's the only path for
right,
every child
right.
is
And that's
changed,
not.
and
It's not.
I think
Yeah,
that's actually healthy, right?
I agree.
And for a lot of reasons, but I would be interested because one of the definitions I've read about positioning by other writers is that you want to appeal to people who care a lot about what you value, right? So if
Right.
you value fast sports cars or
Yeah, I do.
affordable electric car, then, that's what I need to talk about. So I
Right.
think it's interesting. There are people throughout this country who care a lot about conservative values,
Hmm.
and they're not in one geographic cluster. They're not like our urban centers of New York City or LA or all together in one fishbowl. And I think, Mark, you could probably talk to how to reach those people with that mindset affordably. That might be beneficial for you to hear, because Mark is like an expert in
Oh
some
yeah.
of the digital means that
Yep.
would actually, and not that we want you to say this to you always want more money, but but actually could be done with the same budget more effectively.
Yep.
So, Mark,
Correct.
why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, with programmatic, you're probably familiar with all those different channels, but the targeting capability that's available with connected TV, audio advertising, all of your search platforms are focused on that now, and
Right.
of course, social. You can do so much targeting now that is real time, and turn it on tomorrow, turn it off the next day, and the the return on that is far more impressive than just trying to do the broad based advertising that's been done in the past. A
Right.
lot of organizations, business to business especially, never thought TV was an option. But now, because I can go out there and I can reach a family that has, teenage people in it, that has a capability to be very attractive to organizations like a university. And you already have your modes of going out and selling and being at college fairs and things like that, but even as you travel geographically to do that, you're not, I mean, you do have to spend more money, because a like if you come over to Cuyahoga Valley Christian Academy, which is
Right.
north of us about a half
Yep.
an hour,
Very
for
familiar.
you all that's like an hour and 15-minute trip.
Hmm.
But if you go out to Indiana, now you're looking at 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, so your staff has to pay more to get out there.
Yep.
It would be much better to develop that advertising that brings the prospect to you, rather than having to go the other way with it.
Right.
So geographically, the way that you could expand that way is through the programmatic channels that are available that have a lot of targeting involved. And we know we had Roy Williams on here
Yeah. I watched it.
last year, yeah,
Yeah.
and he was against targeting entirely. And I think, he's talking about
Yeah.
retail, and he's talking about many times very local organizations, and we couldn't agree with him more. But when you're looking at this scenario where your dollar's only going to go so far,
Right.
and you need every impression to count, those programmatic channels that are available now are just, they're so attractive. You can't argue with them. They might cost more per impression, but they cost more, or they give you better
Right.
reach. You only have maybe 5 to 10% wasted impression instead of 90 to 95% wasted impression.
Yeah.
It's almost upside down in terms of that. So,
Yeah.
And since I'm the oldest person on this panel by far, um, I'm going to go
Maybe
back
not.
to something I long ago used to introduce a new brand of cat litter and have forgotten about. And it was called indexing markets.
Hmm.
Like
yeah.
we actually indexed markets by
Yep.
cat ownership. And therefore, we didn't have money to spend everywhere. So
Right.
we decided to pick off the top 10 markets because we could
Yep.
afford to be in those markets. And
Right.
indexing combined with the programmatic and the targeting today still seems to me to be a perfect blend of old school, new school.
Yeah.
You,
I agree.
yeah,
I agree. Yep.
I totally forgot about that. Um,
Yep.
in all the flurry of the new media and everything that's happened. It's like,
Yeah,
let's
and I
just
think
do
you
an
made a good
index.
point. It's not out with the old and in with the new. I think
Yeah,
it's a combination. I think it's a both and. And
right.
Hmm.
using them together, I think is a really effective means of reaching audience. I mean, that's why Walmart just spent what $2 billion to buy Vizio TV because of the set top data that they're going to acquire and to be able
Yep.
to understand what are people watching and how do we target different products to them based on their viewing preferences. So yeah, the whole move towards programmatic and retail media, I think is proof that this works.
Yeah.
Yeah, the psychographic targeting is unbelievable. It's a little scary. And
Yeah.
with AI now, they're
Right.
able to quickly develop models that you wouldn't otherwise be able to figure out on your own.
Right. Yeah. But you're
Yeah.
exactly right. I mean, our product is one, our college is one that definitely needs to do psychographic modeling and targeting
Right.
because we're looking for a particular kind of student here. We're not
And I
for
think a
everyone.
particular type of family who supports that
Correct.
student,
Yeah.
because I
Correct.
know some people from our church who attended your college. In fact, I think we interviewed them, and not most higher ed involves parents as well too,
Right.
especially when you're talking about living on campus type of situation. But I think what came across very loud and clear was the decision for Grove City seemed to be more influenced by family commitment than other schools like Ohio
Mhm.
Yeah.
State or well, maybe Ohio State's a bad example because people are rabid about that. But it
Yeah.
just seemed there was a lot more involvement and appreciation for the values of the school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's why I love teaching here. It's like a teacher's dream. I go into the classroom in the morning. Students are respectful. They're sitting there. They have their notebooks open, ready to learn. I'm like, you guys are a teacher's dream. I can't imagine what some classrooms are like these days, and the students aren't motivated to learn and they don't really care.
Yeah.
But it's really nice to be in a place where students really are really desirous of learning and willing to work hard to learn. Um, and so, yeah, it's kind of a unique student that we bring here that
Mhm.
I'm blessed to be able to teach.
And
Yeah,
I
I
can
taught.
attest to that. When I taught there, it was night and day compared to some other colleges that I go into and lecture. The students at Grove City were outstanding. The engagement with the questions that evening that I did the lecture, and then the next day in the classroom, all attentive. And I think you were the only one that fell asleep while I was lecturing.
I didn't think you saw me. Yeah. Well,
So, Mark,
it's
you
it.
you could
Yeah.
have been a pastor.
I could have
It was
been.
going to be your
Yeah.
direction, but the Lord directed your steps elsewhere, as I heard.
That's
That
correct.
was your
Well,
plan.
ironically, I was in seminary in Indiana, just like where Scott was, and God directed us otherwise. So,
Oh my God, that's so funny.
Well, I was
That's
the
so,
black sheep because both my father and my grandfather were pastors, one for 52 years, the other for 42 years.
oh, God bless.
And it started a very large church here. And I was just the quote heir apparent. I was next in line. And I'm like, that's just not my calling. And for a while, I was kind of the family black sheep, but they've
Yeah.
accepted me now that I'm a teacher instead of a
Oh,
preacher.
and Lorraine, you don't know this. This will be
mhm.
off the record. Don't worry, I'll edit this out.
Okay.
But Scott and Jeff McMahon are related.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
we are. Yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
Oh,
His
wow.
mom and my dad are first cousins.
Oh, cool. His dad seemed like a really special person from what Jeff told me. Very humble kind of, guy and was good. He
And
had,
was it your uncle that did the funeral for Jeff's mom?
It was actually my dad. He's
Oh, your
88.
dad did it. Okay.
Still did it.
okay.
He's amazing for 88. So,
Oh,
yeah.
wow. That's great. Yeah. Well, my former pastor's 80, 88 or 87, and he just stopped preaching. It's
Wow.
just, he went to Connecticut and continued to preach. So
Nice.
good.
Nice. I doubt I'll be here when I'm 86. I don't think I got that much gas in the tank
Well,
yet.
you don't know.
But
So
yeah, good.
one of the other questions I had was, it's kind of an interesting thing, all this uh, politicking about the government
Right.
freeing students from debt. An NPR survey showed that most Americans prefer that the government help rein in college costs. Now, you don't accept government funding, so,
Right.
but they rather than forgiving debt.
Right.
So I guess the question is, we're in this idea today of the affordability of the four-year college. And
Right.
while I think it's good to have other paths open and vocational, and I certainly applaud that,
Yep.
um, what effect do you think that the higher costs have had on maybe deterring students who should choose a four-year
Right.
college as a path?
First of all, I completely agree. I don't think a
Mhm.
four-year college is right for everyone. I think there are a lot of students who have abilities and career paths that a vo-tech school or a technical school or even a high school degree where you can get on the job training are really the best courses of action for them.
Mhm.
That said, the students that do want a four-year education, most colleges are spending so profligately.
Mhm.
It's ridiculous how much
Mhm.
money is spent. Grove City has always, by definition, kind of been forced to be a little bit more efficient with their use of money because we don't get any government funds.
Right.
Right.
And we don't have a huge endowment to just, rest on our laurels and take all the interest and spend as we wish. So we've always been kind of forced to be efficient. And I like that. It's kind of in our DNA.
Yeah.
Um, and again, it's hard. I feel bad for these students that actually graduate with mountains of debt.
Oh.
And I'm
Mhm.
like, how especially if it's in a career path that's a really valuable career but may not pay a lot of money. If I'm a social work major and I'm coming out and I've got $90,000 in debt, how do I pay that? That
There's
just
no
seems
way.
responsible to me, not for the person, but for schools to do that to someone.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
I totally agree. And I think what's happened is we went through this empire building
yeah,
phase, right? Where everywhere you turn, they're building new buildings and new amenities and all to attract students. And it was if there was never going to come a day when you had to pay the piper. I mean,
right,
and then to participate too, I think in forcing students to take loans or let's say this is the bad use of marketing to
right,
incentivize students to take loans that their career would never pay back in a
no,
reasonable lifetime, I think is
right.
criminal. Yeah.
I
I
agree.
hope that stops.
And it's like those credit cards, no credit,
Mhm.
bad credit. We've got a card for you. It's only 70% interest. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, here's someone who dug themselves into a hole and you're giving them a bigger shovel. I
Yeah.
just don't think that's good
No,
marketing.
it's not
Yeah.
responsible at all.
I
So,
agree.
and I know Grove City, from what you said earlier, you're managing your size, you're managing because
Right.
you feel that that's key to the quality and the type of education and even who you are DNA wise. I
Right.
wish more colleges had that kind of tether to their position, to their idea of who they are and what they offer. That's a
Yeah,
powerful thing.
I agree. And it's just fortuitous that God led me here because I didn't know a lot about colleges. And I just happened to be connected with one that I think has done a really responsible job and is trying to really do a good job of educating students without, financially paralyzing them for years. So
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know.
Good. Well, we're up against the
Yep.
hour here, and
Okay.
I mentioned to you, Scott, potentially talking a little bit about Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
Yeah.
and we're doing an episode here in 2 weeks about experiential marketing.
Okay.
We use the progression of brands up that hierarchy of needs to explain why experiential marketing has even come on the scene.
Yeah.
But since you did your thesis, was that your MBA or doctoral?
It was actually a project for one of my doctoral courses, and it's funny that you say that because I was just, excuse me, teaching about that in class this morning, my consumer
Okay.
behavior class.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Well, very good. Are you teaching it in the sense of the way brands have progressed through the years toward what we're now calling experiential marketing?
Yeah, I'm kind of building on that. So in the class, the topic today was motivation and looking at what motivates people to buy certain things. And so we talked about, Maslow's hierarchy. And my paper, I took a little different approach because he's kind of like the father of motivational theory.
Mhm.
I wanted to know what motivated him to be a motivational researcher.
Oh,
And
interesting.
it's a really interesting background of why he got into the field that he did. And then we kind of look at the pyramid and say, okay, which brands are kind of positioning themselves as this? We're going to meet your safety needs, your security needs, your so yeah. But today's focus was really on just the concept of understanding your clients or prospects' desires. What motivates them? What's the motive for them trying to buy something like this?
Hmm. So what was your conclusion as to why he got into it?
It was really interesting because the more I read and studied him, the easier it was. He had a very dysfunctional and very abusive childhood. And
Huh.
he literally said, I hated my mother. And my entire life work was aimed at refuting everything that she told me.
Hmm.
And apparently she was very cold, very abusive, very detached. And if you recall, he got into rhesus monkey research, where they would take monkeys, one away from the mother, and one would stay with a nurturing mother, and one would go onto this kind of wire mannequin. And the mannequin monkey that never received love ended up being very, very angry and violent and not well balanced.
Right.
And he said, I've always wondered, why wasn't I like the monkey? Because I never had motherly love. And what motivated me not to sadly commit suicide or to give up, given that the sad childhood that I had. And it's a really interesting path that took him into studying motivational theory.
Huh.
That's really interesting, because one of our clients, Dr. Merle Griff, created Sarah Care, which is adult day day care as opposed to assisted living.
Okay.
And she is actually trained as a child psychologist from Temple University in Philadelphia. And she has said we were in a book club, and she made the statement that a child deprived of mother's love almost never recovers.
No,
So here's an example of someone who recovered. It'd be really interesting to know what else happened in his life, because you will find that this is a pretty common problem in today's society, with those people who become sociopathic or psychopathic or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's a very interesting topic to me.
Yeah.
Very good.
Well, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you for having me, guys.
Thank you. We appreciate it. And we'll probably chunk this up into a couple episodes, since we got in over an hour here.
Yeah.
And we'll let you know beforehand when it's ready to publish. And first one will be on Monday, early morning. So we'll see how it edits out, and, let us know what your students think. I think you have to make it required listening, right? Their homework assignment.
Yeah, and you're coming over in a few weeks, so I'll make
April 18th, I think.
That's right. Yeah. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. And we'll have our discussion about the Nephilim and everything else.
That's good. I'd like
to get there. We'll try to get there Wednesday night.
Yes, good.
We'll let the girls go shopping, so my wife can do what she loves to do, and your wife can do it without you around.
Like it. Sounds good. Lorraine, it was so nice catching up with you. It's been too long.
Yeah, well, good catching up with you too. If you cut this out, Mark, that'll be good. But
yes,
if you ever need an adjunct professor, I'd be available to do that.
Yeah, that's great.
Because my relationship with Innis is I'm no longer an associate of Innis, but obviously I stay very close, because we built together the positioning practice that we use. So
good.
So
well, if you don't mind, send me your contact information.
Okay, I will do that, because I love to teach. I was going to tell you, I started teaching. I was a teaching fellow at North Texas State, which is now University of North Texas. But my master's was in art. And so I was teaching art, and I had all these students who were art majors. And I said, you need to have a sketchbook. And I would give them assignments, either a watercolor a week, and I remember them complain. I remember the whole group rallied and complained, we didn't think we'd have homework. I'm like, this is your major. You don't become an artist by an hour in a studio.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was like mind-boggling. Mrs. Kessler, we didn't think we'd have homework.
Yeah, I've had a few students like that over the years too. Yeah.
Oh, it was crazy. But anyway, it was really good catching up with you. I think this is going to be a great session. So
yeah, I wish you the best, and I hope things go well with your dog, and you get many more days and years of.
I know.